Hey, what's up everybody? It's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and per request, we are talking about the new Klipsch ProMedia Lumina 2.1 speakers. This has a retail price of $380, and the 2.1 means it comes with 2 speakers and a subwoofer. So the Lumina speaker is the newest one from Klipsch Audio from the ProMedia lineup, and that has a legendary name to it. And I'm not just saying that. If you are familiar with these types of computer speakers, the ProMedia, the THX stuff that they had in the past, it ranged from like $150 to several $100s, depending on which version you got. And I used to work at Best Buy, and I remember every time the store closed, when phones had headphone jacks, I would just plug in the THX speakers that were connected to a speaker demo for a computer to my phone, and we would just blast music all night while we were cleaning up and restocking shelves. So I know the old ProMedia stuff were powerhouses, so when I found out that Klipsch had a new one with modern tech, naturally I was pretty excited. I will, however, not let that fond nostalgia taint my view on this because, obviously when you look at stuff that you had like a very fond memory of, things will sound better to you because you kind of say, oh, that was so good back then. It's kind of like you had that old sound system that was incredible and then you hear it or something like it and it doesn't quite sound as good as you remember. It's because of the memories that you had from it, but I'm digressing a bit. So it won't affect what I say about it. This was sent to me for review by Klipsch. That won't affect what I say about it either, and I was not paid in any way to make this. I don't do any kickbacks with the brand or anything like that. So I want to talk about some of the basics and what makes this a new and improved speaker in some regards, and it's basically down to features. Lumina obviously means light, so let's start there. And the new speakers have these diffused lighting systems built into the left and right speaker. There are several ways to control the lighting of this system, and one of them is through a Bluetooth app, because these do have Bluetooth built in, 5.3, and you can control and make changes to it while it's simultaneously connected via USB to your computer. That's called the Klipsch Connect app, and it of course works on Android and iPhone. If you have a Windows computer, you can install the Klipsch Control app, and the Control app has the exact same features as the Bluetooth app, so don't feel like you have to install both to have different feature sets and control. You can basically just pick one and roll with it. The other way to control RGB is through Windows Dynamic Lighting, so you don't even have to install the app on the computer if you just want it for the RGB control. You can have it link up to Windows, which can control dynamic lighting, but you can also use Windows to control it with static lighting and its own patterns in case you just want to fix color. There isn't any official Mac OS app to control these, so if you are connecting this to a MacBook, for example, just rely on the Bluetooth app if you want all the extra controls. Now, the Bluetooth app does quite a bit. You can do custom EQ. There are 6 bands of EQ settings, and it's honestly pretty close to a reference sound signature out of the box. And what I mean by that is it doesn't have any like really weird peaks. I'll get into the sound quality later, but the 6-band isn't too bad because there really isn't a lot you have to customize to fix anything. You also have presets for music, which is basically flat plus EQ, movie, which changes the frequency response, and virtual sound, which kind of changes the treble tuning in kind of a weird way, but you can mess with that. You can also digitally control the subwoofer volume, which is really handy, and the software dial on the back of the subwoofer is digital, so it's the exact same control. You're not operating them independently from each other. So between the PC app, the mobile device app, and the back of the sub, you have a lot of ways to adjust it. Now, the cables that connect this whole system together are quite unique because the left speaker uses a 9-pin serial cable, if you remember those guys, and it's a very secure, robust connection, but it also means it's not easily replaceable because the speaker wire is not detachable. There's a lot of stuff to control the RGB lighting, power, USB, all of that. So this cable is just one easy way to terminate all of the pins that it needs. If you do need to extend these, so these cables are 2 meters, roughly 6.5 feet long. If that's too short for you, because this is a stand-up desk, I had to run it a certain way where I couldn't tuck the wire and hide it, so keep that in mind. However, I didn't test this, but you could always experiment by purchasing a serial extension cable. Before you go ahead and purchase 2 of those, moving on to the right speaker is actually a 15-pin VGA style cable, so you'll have to do 2 different extensions if you need to make these longer. I do like that they're pretty robust and they screw into the back of the sub, so you won't have any accidental disconnects. I've had Logitech speakers in the past where the cables kind of wear out over time, and even the Creative speakers, so they get kind of staticky and break down. Hopefully this never happens. These cables are significantly more robust, but it's not as easy to service, again, because it's not fully detachable from the speakers themselves. The rest of the connections are pretty straightforward. It comes with a USB-C cable in the box, and that's what you'll connect to your computer. No more analog 3.5 millimeter. However, it does have an analog 3.5 millimeter if you still want to connect it that way. It does not include an analog 3.5 millimeter cable, so if you want to replace the exact same connection setup you have maybe have the old Pro series from Klipsch in the past, you have to purchase that cable separately or use an old cable you might have lying around. Not a huge fan of that considering the price point, but it is what it is, so I want to call that out. In addition to having a unique connection per each speaker, the back of each speaker has some unique stuff as well. So the left speaker actually has a USB-C charge port. It does not do USB data pass-through. It's literally just for charging something, but it does come in handy. It's not a super high-powered, PD 3.0 device. It's not going to rapid charge a phone, but if you need to quickly top something off, maybe you have a wireless mouse, it just makes it kind of convenient to give you a quick access port right there. With the right speaker having a 15-pin cable, naturally that means it does more, and that's where the controls are. You have volume up and down, and they're kind of clicky when you tap them. There's also a button between the volume controls to quickly toggle the RGB lighting on and off, and behind the right speaker you have a button to toggle through the inputs being analog, USB-C, and the Bluetooth connection. Pressing and holding that button will power cycle the speakers in case you want to turn them off entirely, and behind the speaker is a 3.5mm analog connection with microphone support. So naturally I wanted to show you what the microphone sounded like on the Pro Lumina speaker system, and the microphone sounds pretty good. This is the EPOS H6 Pro mic. It's an older headset now, but the microphone's pretty average for gaming headsets, at least to me, same or on the better side. Just keep in mind, if you have hard to drive headphones, these are not for that. This is good for maybe IEMs or very efficient gaming headsets, but that's kind of where I would draw the line. Two other quirks I want to quickly call out before we get into the sound quality and kind of finish with this video, and one of them is the Bluetooth behavior. It kind of has a louder beep when it initiates, at least like it's not playing at full blast, but when it first connects, the tone that is played to connect to your phone can get quite loud. So if you're doing that at night, it might bother some people near you. To counter that, one nice feature it has that segues into this is on the software you have night mode, which greatly reduces the bass. It says by 50%. It sounds like it's even more than a 50% reduction. However, the advantage of that is if you have all your settings kind of dialed in, how you like it to sound, but you want to watch a YouTube video at night without, bothering everyone because a commercial comes on, it's loud, you can do that and it effectively shuts off the subwoofer or close to it, so you won't bother people. And that's a pretty handy feature because you can just quickly toggle it back on. The other thing that was a unique issue to my Mac computer is the RGB is, honestly, I like the RGB. As you can tell, I like lights. I'm like an insect. And when these go to sleep, like when they idle out, they have this soft, like ambient, warm, orangish glow to them, which I love. The timeout function is so nice and convenient because it's kind of waiting to go to sleep and shut off. However, on my Mac, it didn't always wake up back to the old RGB settings I had. On Windows, it was never an issue, especially because I use dynamic lighting on Windows, so it would always communicate with it and basically apply the RGB settings Windows wanted it to have. So it never became an issue there, but on Mac, it was an odd bug, so I wanted to point that out. I'm on firmware version 1.0.3, so this could change in future updates, but at the time of filming this, that's kind of how it behaves. Okay, so let's talk about sound quality because they are speakers at the end of the day, and this is probably the most important part. And I want to make a couple very quick comparisons. So there's the Logitech G560, which sells for $250. It's a pretty good software set. Logitech's G Hub is not that bad. Some people have different experiences with it, but it's worked well for me. I don't think those speakers sound nearly as clear as these. The sound quality is not bad, but it just sounds a little bit more muffled and you have a little bit less detail and less power handling. So if you have that set and you want to know if the Klipsch speakers is a true upgrade, everything just sounds more clear. The bass is a little bit tighter and more punchy as well, but it's noticeably more clear. There's more similarity with the SteelSeries Arena 7 speaker, which has the exact same price of this at $380. I am intimately familiar with those because they're actually on my racing sim. I 3D printed some stands and I use those for when I don't want to wear a headset just because they're small and light, and the RGB function's pretty cool. So what's unique with the Arena 7 on the lighting side, which has a lot of parity against the Lumina stuff from Klipsch, SteelSeries, if you run the SteelSeries GG software, the engine software, it can actually use the display information to individually control the RGB effects of your speakers and even tie that into other SteelSeries products. So if you're on a racing game, for example, and the right side has like a red wall and the left side's grass or white, then you will have a red illumination on the right side of your speaker and the other side will look more white. Windows dynamic lighting can have some fun stuff that will apply to this, but it's not the same as what SteelSeries does with the Arena. So the RGB stuff is a little bit more, I guess, feature rich, but for how I typically use it, at least at the computer side, it's a cool effect, but that's really down to personal preference. Obviously, these are speakers, and I think the sound quality should be the most important thing to consider. The SteelSeries stuff isn't bad. So what I noticed, it's kind of funny because SteelSeries tunes their speakers to sound somewhat similar to their headsets. There's elevated bass, and there's a elevated presence around 8,000 hertz. And you don't have to know what these frequencies are, but basically it's kind of a sharper, sparkly sound. And the voices sound a little bit thinner because they're all of the tonality of the voice is kind of shifted up in that higher frequency. It sounds a little bit more lispy and sparkly sounding. And the bass is a little bit more thumpy on the SteelSeries Arena. So the SteelSeries Arena, the bass is deeper sounding to an extent just because I think the bass is softer. It's kind of shifted slightly lower, but it doesn't have quite the same power handling as the Klipsch. They are rated to have almost the exact same max SPL, 98 dBs for this and 100 decibels for the SteelSeries Arena. However, I found that when I push it at higher volumes, the bass can't keep up on the SteelSeries Arena, whereas the Klipsch Lumina system just keeps going, almost to its detriment because the bass gets incredibly loud and it starts to rattle things in this room. I have a lot of products in here. The bass is very punchy. I wish that they voiced the subwoofer a little bit deeper. At moderate volumes, I actually like the subwoofer more on the SteelSeries Arena 7. SteelSeries also gives you parametric EQ, so you can fully customize the sound profile if you know what you're doing to fix it to your own personal preference. If you don't know what you're doing, I think it can actually make it sound worse. Whereas out of the box, not messing with any settings, the Klipsch Lumina system sounds better. It's a lot more neutral, and the bass is, again, very punchy and tight. This is rated to 40 hertz for the lowest frequency response with roll-off, and the SteelSeries is rated at 35 hertz. And it does sound pretty accurate in terms of the SteelSeries getting a little deeper. However, if you turn it up, the Klipsch system is so much more punchy and hard-hitting, and to me, it's an entirely different level of performance at higher volumes. I think that's part of what you're getting with the Klipsch system as a unique selling point. Because the Klipsch app allows you to set custom EQ settings to fine-tune this sound, what I found was I just boosted the 50 hertz slider and I reduced the 150 hertz just a little bit. The Klipsch speakers crossed over at 150 hertz for the sub, meaning these speakers handle 150 hertz and up, and the subwoofer is 150 hertz and below. So if you pull that slider down, you are taking a little bit of warmth away from these speakers, which I wish it didn't do. If they had a couple different sliders, maybe it would help kind of more granularly fine-tune the bass profile. But just boosting the subwoofer volume to 3 or 4 from 0, so lift the overall gain of the sub just by a few dBs, boost 50 hertz by honestly a good amount of bass, probably like 4 or 5 decibels. And if you find that it's too boomy and hard-hitting, reduce the 150 hertz by a couple dB. And the rest of it is personal preference. I had some fun boosting the 3 higher frequency bands by 1 to 2 decibels each, and that can be really fun to listen to, but it can also be a little more fatiguing. So it's all about what you think sounds best for the music you listen to. Now, I want to look out for you and mention a couple key things here. These are consumer-focused speakers, and I think there's specific markets for this. These are very fun to listen to. They're extremely loud. I think the bass, I wish just shifted a little bit deeper. I think the older THX-based systems had deeper bass. These are just more clear in the higher frequency. So you definitely hear more detail with these. I just wish the bass profile sounded more robust. Part of that is the subwoofer is noticeably thinner, which I honestly think is a big selling point in this case, because a lot of people are shifting to desks that telescope and go up and down. And if you have a desk that has that crossbar across the bottom, a thinner sub allows you to fit it behind the crossbar without having to pull your desk out or have your subwoofer sit awkwardly in front of it or to the side. And a lot of other solutions just don't fit behind those bars where they typically get put. So, as much as I wish it was a deeper sounding subwoofer, I like that you can conceal its placement a little bit more. Lack of concealment on the subwoofer design itself, though. There's no grill to cover the driver. It's exposed. So if you have little kids that like to poke things, keep that in mind. SteelSeries has its own unique flaw. It has a base port that I'm sure kids would love to stuff crayons into. So no solution's perfect. I think this could have benefited from having a grill. But, I don't know if it's packaging or price or what. That's just the way they decided to design it. So I'm going to mention a couple things here. Again, I mentioned this is consumer focused. There's lighting on it. There's the USB charge port, all these extra things. You are paying for that. It's not purely sound quality. You can buy KEF Q150 speakers. They've gone on sale for $300 for 2 bookshelf speakers that sound incredible. They are significantly larger than these, so they're going to take up more desk space, but they sound great. The Kali active speakers, Kali Audio, and the JBL 305s and 306s are all more reference, much more accurate sounding speakers purely at the higher frequencies. They have their own unique flaws. I think the JBLs have a little bit of a hiss to them. The Kalis to me are a little bit more easy to deal with, but they don't have the same bass impact as this because it doesn't even come with a subwoofer. The prices will easily exceed what this gets as soon as you want that extra bass. So it's all about how much you're willing to spend and what you're willing to sacrifice. And I think there's a lot of good options out there. I think what Klipsch did here is they addressed a pretty wide demographic on the consumer and gaming side of things because it's fun to look at, it's flashy, it has RGB. They're not so over the top where it looks cheap. And I like the fact that they allow you to tilt these because I almost didn't mention this, but this uses a horn tweeter system. It's a loaded horn. And the reason why this is important to call out is horns can be very directional. These are very efficient, and that's a signature Klipsch design. But if you move your head around, you will hear the frequency response change. It's kind of hard to explain without showing you, so I'm just going to grab my phone real quick and move it up and down so you can hear the difference in frequency response just by where it's being placed. Quite a big difference in the treble response based off where you're sitting and how the speakers are positioned. So that kind of lends itself to the design importance of having a speaker that can tilt like this, because I wish it tilted a slightly more up just to give you more flexibility if you're really tall. But for what I think in most room situations, you want these angled up as much as possible at your desk if they're sitting at desk level. If they're elevated, then you always want them pointing at you as much as possible. That's your angle or your tilt. And then you want to do what's called toe, where the speakers angle inward to always point at exactly where your head is. So if you could think of laser beams shooting out of the tweeter, a fine point, try to make it so the laser beams hit right here. And you can change the tonality a little bit by shifting them outward or inward. So if they sound a little bit too bright, maybe toe them out slightly and you can change the imaging performance. So very important to place these correctly. If they're really wide on your desk and firing straight, you're not going to get the same sound quality that these were engineered for. Klipsch they've really refined the tweeter array. This new design in the waveguides, I think is good. It's showing the direction that they're going with their other higher end stuff as well. So it's important to take that in consideration for where you set these up. Before I go, I wanted to give you a couple quick audio demos, but there is an important caveat with this is I am playing this in my room, recording it with 2 microphones, and then you're listening to it either on a phone or headphone, IEMs, whatever you're listening to it. All of these things are going to change the way this actually sounds in my room. You're not hearing a one-for-one representation, but it might give you an idea, and because it's a speaker review for this, people are always going to ask in the comments, you didn't even show what it sounded like. So here's a couple generic clips from YouTube's free audio stuff so I don't get copyright flagged, just so you can hear what they sound like. obviously, even with the limitations considered of how I can record and replay this back to you for your own demo experience, you can still tell they're quite clear and quite powerful. So hopefully they help give you an idea. And that takes me to the end of the video. I'm not here to try to sell you these speakers. I think there's pros and cons to a lot of products out there, and I'm pleased to say I don't think this is like a train wreck product in any way. If you're an audio purist and you're chasing true hi-fi fidelity, get a more expensive Klipsch speaker, get the JBLs or the Kali Audio for more reference sound, get Genelecs if you want to spend a hefty little price tag. Then you're buying a subwoofer and dealing with other things. So just keep in mind this is a consumer-based product, and I think they balance sound quality that people want with some consumer-friendly and gamer-friendly features in addition. So the good news is it still sounds good, and when you compare it to a lot of other competing products in this category, whether it's Logitech, SteelSeries, etc., there are some clear advantages of what Klipsch gives you. So you are paying a little bit more in the price range for a system like this, but at least you're getting it back in raw performance. And I think for a lot of people, they're going to be very happy with the sound quality. I think it's only going to get better over time as long as the firmware keeps improving and they address a few bugs. But in terms of just plugging and playing and going, it sounds quite good. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching this review. I hope you found it helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you at the next one. Take care.